All right, here we go. This is chapter 2, day 19, section 2.6, the first day, day 1, quadratic formula and the discriminant. And the discriminant is the first thing we're going to start with. And it has a lot of I's in it and no E's. Discriminant, A-N-T. All right, so the discriminant is a way to learn something about the solution without having to actually take time to get the solution. It's also a way to check your answer. So first of all, what the heck is it? Okay, so you know now that the quadratic formula is x equals -1 times b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2 times a. And we've been working with this. And of course, this assumes that your equation is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So you know this. This is the quadratic formula. The discriminant is the part of it that's under the radical. It does not include the radical. It's just the part under the radical. So your discriminant is b squared minus 4ac, no radical. That is your discriminant, which is much faster to calculate than doing the whole thing. All right, so that's your discriminant. All right, so part B, what are the rules? What does it tell us? Okay, so first up, if the discriminant b squared minus 4ac equals exactly 0, it means you're going to have one real solution. Your solution will be rational, which means there will be no square root with a number under it. You should get one real solution and it will be rational. So an example of this would be an answer like 2 plus and minus square root 0 all over 3. And what you can see is if the discriminant is 0, not only does the square root go away, but the plus minus goes away because it's attached to the square root. So if the discriminant is actually 0, everything goes away and you have typically a fraction or a whole number answer. And this rule helps you know that ahead of time. Okay, second rule. If b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, so it's any number greater than 0, it means you're going to have two real solutions. But these solutions could be rational or irrational. So they might have a radical, they might not have a radical. Okay, so an example of this, let's say it's a number like a 5. So 2 plus and minus square root 5 all over 3. So you can see that your discriminant is greater than 0. It's a 5. So the plus and the minus stay intact and give you two answers. Now in this case, the 5 is trapped in the radical. So in this case, you will have two irrational answers because the discriminant is not a perfect square. Now in contrast, let's say that it was 2 plus and minus radical 16 all over 3. Now, in this case, the same rule applies. It's still greater than 0, but you can tell if it's a perfect square, 4 times 4 is 16, you're going to get something like 1 plus and minus 4 over 3, so that the radical will go away, and you will have two rational answers. So yes, the discriminant being greater than 0 means two real solutions. But if you look at it closely, if it's a perfect square, you should get two rational answers. If it's not a perfect square, two irrational answers. All right, last one. Let's say that b squared minus 4ac is less than 0. It's a negative number. If you have a negative discriminant, you're going to have two imaginary, or you could say two complex solutions. And these complex solutions could be rational or irrational, but they will both have an I in them. So rational or irrational. So let's see an example. Let's say you've got 2 plus and minus radical negative 4 all over 3. So the discriminant was a negative 4, which means it's going to have an imaginary number in it. In this case, 2 plus minus 2 2's, one would come out. You'd have the I, and then they would both be over a 3. So in that case, the number was a perfect square, and it was negative. So we have 2 imaginary rational solutions. Rational means whole numbers or fractions. 2 imaginary rational solutions. Okay, and then in contrast, let's say it was 4 plus and minus radical negative 10 all over 5. So again, the discriminant is negative. So you have 2 imaginary answers, but in this case, the 10 is not a perfect square, so your answer is going to have a radical in it. In fact, it's going to be 4/5 plus or minus radical 10/5 I. So because the number is not a perfect square, you will still have 2 imaginary solutions, but they will be irrational. They will have a radical in it. So 2 imaginary irrational solutions. All right, so those are your 3 basic rules. Any questions about the 3 basic rules? This is one of these nifty shortcut things that comes handy on the SAT or the ACT when you just need a quick response without working the whole thing out. This will save you a lot of time. All right, let's do an example. Example 1, we're going to do 2x squared plus 3x minus 1 equals 0. And it's already in the right format. So A is 2, B is 3, C is negative 1. We're going to calculate B squared minus 4AC using those numbers. So here we go. For B is 3, so 3 squared minus 4 times 2 for A times negative 1 for C. You do the perfect square first. 3 times 3 is 9. You multiply second. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 times a negative 1 is a positive 8. And 9 plus 8 is 17. That is your discriminant. Okay, using the rule, in this case, the discriminant is greater than 0, which means we're going to have 2 real, and in this case, it's not a perfect square, so 2 real irrational solutions. Okay, just to keep our complex and irrationals and rationals straight, will an irrational solution show up on the graph? Will an irrational solution show up on a graph? What for sure will not show up on a graph? Imaginary, yeah. Imaginary solutions will not ever show up on the graph. They're imaginary. Irrational is awkward to graph and kind of a pain because you've got a number under a square root, but it'll still show up. It'll show up as a decimal or a fractional value on the graph. But yeah, it'll still show up on the graph. All right, let's do another one. X squared plus 2x plus 12 equals 0. So our A is the invisible 1, B is 2, C is 12. We're going to calculate the discriminant, which is B squared minus 4AC. And like all formulas, write it as many times as possible so you get it memorized. All right, here we go. B is 2, so 2 squared minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is 12. When you evaluate, you do the perfect square first. 2 times 2 is 4. Then you multiply these numbers. Negative 4 times 12 is negative 48. And 4 minus 48 is negative 44. All right, so in this case, our discriminant was less than 0. So we're into the imaginaries. We're going to have 2 imaginary answers. And 44 is not a perfect square. It's 4 times 11. So it's going to still be trapped under the radical. So it's going to be 2 imaginary irrational solutions. Because 44 wasn't a perfect square. Which makes it really easy on a multiple choice test to pick out the answers. You're looking for 2 imaginary answers with a radical in it. It usually narrows it down pretty well. All right, example 3, last one. X squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 0. A is the invisible 1. B is 6. C is 9. We're going to calculate the discriminant. So b squared minus 4ac. Okay, b is 6. So 6 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times 9, which is c. All right, perfect square comes first. 6 times 6 is 36. And then negative 4 times 9 is negative 36. And 36 minus 36 is a 0. So our discriminant was equal to exactly 0, which means you're going to have 1 real solution. And since there's no more radical, it will automatically be 1 real rational solution. Because the 0 will blow out the radical, which blows out the plus minus. Then all you have is the first number in the bottom. All right, any questions about that one? All right, that is it.